as most of us know, in 1996, the former Vice President Al Gore kind of, stirred the consciousness of America with his movie, An Inconvenient Truth. And in so doing, even though this information was, available for decades, he really did help to wake us up to the possibility that we are sometimes still slowly and reluctantly acknowledging, that climate change is a significant crisis, and particularly climate change that's been accelerated by human activity. And so here we are 20 years later, and we're in a conversation that's a reasonable conversation to say, yes, we believe that there is something happening and it's a result of our activity, and that it is now time to address that. One of the things that we seem to be a little bit slower to grapple with, and I'm really pleased that Bhikkhu Bodhi spoke before me because he really opened up the conversation, is to actually get at the roots of climate change, to recognize that climate change is not its own thing, but rather climate change is a manifestation. It's evidence of a particular way of being, of habit patterns that we have, of ideologies that dominate our, not only this country, but now throughout the world. And climate change is, I want to say, in the best way, merely evidence of those things. And so for me, focusing solely on climate change without actually getting to the roots is a circular activity in which we will continue to produce the outcomes and try to work with merely the outcomes while not actually addressing the root. Fortunately, Bhikkhu Bodhi already got to at least a very broad, I think, and comprehensive overview of really the root of climate change. Right? And in a very, I really want to thank you. This is the second opportunity I've had to see his presentation. Really addressing deeply, and from the perspective, a perspective that Buddhists can really make sense of, in terms of our own teaching and our shared teaching and practice of what really ails us. Central to that, to all of what he spoke of, is the persistent willingness, the degradation of the planet that is connected directly to the degradation of human beings. That we have within our society, within our hearts, a willingness to degrade our planet because we have within our hearts a willingness to degrade each other. And it is persistent, it is pervasive, and it is insidious. In that, the degrading of human beings, what is required for the economic system of corporate capitalism is an efficient, I'm going to put quotes around, an efficient means of devaluing human beings. And so we actually have to have operating a means by which to quickly decide who is worthy, who has value, and who does not. Who should stay at the top, and who is dispensable, who is replaceable, who can be degraded, right, devalued for the benefit of a fairly small number of people. We know that mass suppression of peoples has happened throughout history in all kinds of ways, for all kinds of reasons. Religion certainly being one of those significant reasons and instigators of oppressions of people. But I want to speak specifically about here in the US and the fact that we here have designed, constructed, and perpetuated an insidious form of mass devaluing of human beings that's rooted in the development of structural anti-Black racism. And alongside that, white supremacy through white hegemony and the conferring of privilege to white skin. In the US, that sits at the heart of our mechanism for devaluing human beings. This impacts not only Black people, it impacts all people. It impacts all races, including white people, and it impacts people that are immigrants, that do not have citizenship. The entire range of humanity in this culture is being sourced and sorted according to their skin color, and I would say more insidiously now, according to the willingness to uphold white skin privilege. And so we don't even have to have white skin anymore to really participate in keeping this structure in place and perpetuating it. And so when I make these comments, it's not to divide people into only white people are doing something, but it is to lift up that the preferential treatment is organized around upholding the supremacy of white-skinned people. And for reasons of internalized oppression, for gaining our own benefit, many, many people of other skin colors, including Black people, participate in that both willingly and also unconsciously as well. It's fair to say that, and I want to say that one of the most dangerous things is that not only have we crafted this structural racism within this country, as we are so good at other things, we have exported this ideology throughout the world. And we export this ideology throughout the world in the forms of this corporate capitalist structure that is invading countries, that is invading, including the motherlands of Buddhism, so that we see people participating in the form of buying, skin bleach and beginning to organize increasingly around separating people according to their skin color. So it does not just remain here, even though it has been particularly cultivated here. It's fair to say that there are many isms and many frontiers of imbalance and injustice that deserve our attention. But what I'd like to do is to encourage you, as the Buddha encouraged all of us, is to really look deeply into the unwholesome roots of climate change and all other forms of the degrading of life, as Bhikkhu Bodhi presented here. You may feel, especially in a presentation that vast, that the vastness, right, that the massive interwoven structure of economic dominance that's held in place by greed, fear and anxiety, arrogance and ignorance is insurmountable. And I often feel that way. When we look at something like that and you see how completely interwoven it is, we can feel a sense of like, what could we possibly do about that? How can we possibly cut a root, as unwholesome as it may be, that goes so deep and is so entrenched within all layers of our society, including within our governments, through state-sponsored violence, through institutionalized racism, it can feel overwhelming. What can Buddhists do, given the fact that we are situated in teachings that are wholesomely rooted in kindness and a fervent wish for peace and the relief of and liberation from suffering? And I thought about coming here to talk to you about that, and I thought, that's just crazy. What could I say? As it happens, I was sitting in the garden, and we have, those, they're clovers. That's not their proper name, but they're clover, and they grow all over the place. And every spring, we're sort of like after them, trying to pull them out. And we're always having conversations with people about, well, you have to get to the root. You have to get to the root, or else it will just grow back up again. And I was looking at the garden, and I realized that this time we have much, much less of those clover taking over the place. And it isn't because we were able to reach in and get every single root. It's because we looked at the conditions of the soil in which those roots are able to be sustained and to grow and to be nurtured. And we changed the conditions of the soil. So I encourage you to consider that addressing climate change requires climate justice, which is to say that we have to have a climate of justice, and that we as Buddhists can contribute fiercely and strongly to creating a climate of justice. We can begin to take out, to undo the conditions of racism, of structural racism, that help to nurture the root cause of greed, aggression, ignorance, that sustains the socioeconomic structure that is truly taking the life force out of our planet. While individuals in our own situations may think, oh, I have the issues that are of concern to me and to my community, I invite you to look very deeply into any issue that is facing your community. And you will see that it sits and it grows in the soil of structural racism. Not just individual, person-to-person, interpersonal racism. So I'm not just talking about people saying bad things to people, bad words, or thinking poorly of them, but in the structural racism that exists far too often right within our own Buddhist communities. Whether Western convert communities or sometimes even Asian communities, we are perpetuating within our own sanghas racism, and in so doing, we are cultivating the soil that allows the roots of climate change to continue to grow, to flourish, and to continue to suck the life out of our planet. So may we have the wisdom to see deeply into the nature of the reality of the roots of climate change. May we also have the compassion to bring our attention not only to the suffering that this creates for the millions of people throughout the 400-year history of this construct of racism and the white supremacy and white skin privilege. But may we also have the courage to actually use the full breadth of our teachings as they are. I'm not inviting anybody to change anything. To use the full breadth of our teachings to stand not only to make changes that are necessary within our own communities, but as a Buddhist community that has in the palm of its hands the teachings, the practices, the kind of framework to offer to the larger society. May we have the courage to take our rightful place and stand at the forefront of this kind of deep justice, creating a deep, strong, pervasive climate of justice so that we can address the roots of climate change. Thank you so much.